The NIST Cybersecurity Framework just got a significant upgrade to the 2.0 version. And today we're going to learn all about what that all brings us. Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from the Security Operations Center at Onto It, we bring you the next episode. Let's get on to it. Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity. I'm thrilled to be joined today by two distinguished guests of the NIST. First of all, Amy Mahn. She is the IT Standards Advisor at NIST. Welcome, Amy. And Daniel Eliot. He is the Lead for Small Business Engagement at the Applied Cybersecurity Division at NIST. Welcome, both of you.
Hello.
Great to have you on the show. You guys are both really involved in this next bump of the cybersecurity framework. But first of all, Amy, can you explain what do you do? What's your role within the NIST?
Thank you, and very much appreciate the chance to be here today. Thank you for having both of us. I'm now currently an IT Standards Advisor in our Office of IT Standards at NIST in our Information Technology Laboratory. And throughout the years, I've also very much supported our Applied Cybersecurity Division, where Daniel is, and you'll hear more about that later as well, and have really gotten to support a lot of the international engagement and standards efforts around the cybersecurity framework. And a lot of our engagement has been working closely with both our government partners, and we've been very grateful to work with our State Department and the International Trade Administration, also as part of Commerce, as well as with international government and industry to help develop and refine our resources like the cybersecurity framework. So been grateful to have the chance to support those efforts, and now really being able to take a focus on those standards angles with the framework in a lot of our cybersecurity and privacy resources, and excited to talk a little bit more about that today. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so it's very international as well. I'll get back to that because I'm really curious how broad in the world spread the NIST actually is. Well, I'm from the Netherlands and I use it, so it's more than the United States. Daniel, same question to you actually. You are very much involved in cybersecurity, of course, and in this framework. Can you explain what your day-to-day is?
Yeah, so 99% of the U.S. economy is small business, and so what my primary focus is: how do we engage the small business community across the U.S. in particular, but really globally, in engaging with not only the cybersecurity framework, but in all of our guidance. And so, I work regularly across NIST and across the U.S. government and with the small business community to really help them to create on-ramps to some of NIST's foundational resources. And so a lot of that work is in convening small businesses to get their perspectives on our work and get their comments on our publications, also to present to the small business community and engage them in those ways to help them understand our foundational guidelines and work. I also co-lead the Cybersecurity Framework project. And so really focused on how do we promote the adoption of the cybersecurity framework and encourage implementation of the CSF more broadly. So that's kind of two hats that I wear at NIST.
Yeah. And would you say that small business is actually under addressed in most frameworks? I mean, we have, of course, the big standards like the ISO and the SOC 2, for example, but they seem to be, they are quite focused on the larger enterprise. Is this a big gap you feel that needs filled?
Yeah, which is why when we published, and we'll get more into it, but when we published the cybersecurity framework, alongside it, we published a small business quick start guide, because small businesses often don't have a CISO in-house. Some of them don't even have a managed services provider. And so how can we help them take steps to better secure the organizations when they are under-resourced when it comes to not only cybersecurity, but under-resourced with almost everything.
Yeah.
And so, helping them kind of get a start with some of these frameworks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about the process towards the 2.0 framework, why it was necessary. And then we're going to briefly also touch on the subjects that are key different. And in the next episode, we're actually going to deep dive into three of those. But maybe I also wanted to really put things in perspective a little bit in the NIST, because I am a security professional, and I think of NIST as indeed the security framework, and then we have the defend, protect, etc. So the circle that everybody knows in the nice colors. But NIST is much broader than this. I mean, you guys run our time on the internet. I mean, the atomic clocks actually work like clockwork because the NIST is so specific in making sure that happens. And I believe you define the kilo or the mile or the ounce. I don't know if you use the metric as the basics or the imperial system. I don't know, but the culture of NIST is really in defining things as they should be for the world to use. But it's not a law, correct?
Yes, actually, so we are at NIST a non-regulatory agency, and we sit within the U.S. Department of Commerce. And the main NIST mission is to help advance measurement science and standards and technologies in ways that can help improve our economic security and quality of life. And a lot of that work, as I mentioned, takes place in our information technology laboratory, where I sit in our Office of IT Standardizations and help support our effort in that work. And within ITL, we work to help cultivate trust in technology and really help promote and support that use of standards and our cybersecurity framework, as well as pretty much all of our cybersecurity and privacy resources that we develop here really leverage and use international standards. I know that might come up later in the conversation, but it's been very important for us to have that focus, to bring things like our cybersecurity framework into places like ISO or other standards development organizations as a contribution, and also really make sure to work and ensure that our efforts align with what's going on in ISO and international standards. And that really helps us with working with our international partners. And we might discuss this a little bit later too, but we've been really working to help develop resources and mappings and crosswalks to show how you can use the cybersecurity framework in our resources with existing standards. Maybe even ways how using our frameworks can help improve the way you use other standards and vice versa to really help manage your unique cybersecurity risks. So we always envision that being an important area, but as we said, NIST is much broader, even outside of information technology. We have several labs focusing in areas energy and communications and engineering, physical material measurements. So a lot of great work that's taking place here. Our main campus is in Gaithersburg, Maryland, but we are out in Boulder, Colorado, in a number of different areas, and very excited by the work that is going on here. And particularly in our ITL lab here and across NIST, we very much value collaboration with stakeholders, and you'll really hear that in the discussion today, that we don't just develop these things within NIST or just within the U.S. government, but very much rely on that type of collaboration to bring in that expertise and hear from our partners throughout the world in government and industry to really make sure these tools and frameworks that we develop can be applied on that global scale and everyone can find value no matter what the size of your organization or resources. So that's something you will see across NIST, but again, very excited to have that work that's going on in our information technology laboratory.
Yeah, so you might say that NIST is a backbone for accuracy then, and it's unbiased in a sense that there's no vendor. There may be influence, but certainly not a preference for the commercial sector, right? So it makes you unbiased and therefore, really in a common interest. Is that a difficult thing to do? Because I'm guessing that vendors, especially in the cybersecurity industry, since we're talking about it, are all over you to influence you.
Yeah, but I think the way we work with putting our publications out for public comment and collecting input and being consensus driven really helps with that. But I think why it's so widely adopted is the fact that it is technology agnostic, it's vendor agnostic, this work to help organizations make the right decisions on who might be best or what might be best to do XYZ for them.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how we got to the 2.0. You did a consultation in the community. How international was this?
Thank you. I can start there, but again, Daniel, please jump in if you see fit. And also as noting, as I said earlier, since we are a non-regulatory agency, this framework and our work, it is voluntary for industry to use, and our U.S. government does use NIST work, but we think that has also helped with the uptake here and across the world, and people really have that ability to customize and use it in the way that really helps them to manage their unique cybersecurity risk. But again, it is not regulation, and that is not something that we enforce use of, but very much appreciate the chance to hear feedback and learn about successes and challenges, and that helps us to update our frameworks. And at that point, we are now on version 2.0 of the Cybersecurity Framework. The first version came out back in 2014. We had a presidential executive order directing NIST to work collaboratively across government and industry to develop risk management guidance for cybersecurity. And again, we very much valued that public input and put out that first version of the framework based off what we heard from our stakeholder community. And we did update it once, I think back in 2018 to version 1.1. And that was a bit more of a lighter touch, and we added some new language, but it wasn't a significant overhaul or having the types of changes that you're now seeing in version 2.0 that came out in 2024.
Okay.
But every few years, we reach out again to our community and across the world to ask, is the time right to make some updates to the framework? Because so much always changes in standards and the cybersecurity risk management landscape and in technology. So we want to make sure our work is keeping up with that. So we put out what we called a request for information back in 2022, asking what are some changes that could help make the cybersecurity framework continue to be a useful tool to manage cybersecurity risk. And we again heard that people were finding benefit from it, but it could also really benefit from an update. And
so
we'll talk
everybody
more
could
about this, but that
participate?
new governed function, those changes we'll discuss.
Yeah. So and
Sorry.
you just put out a request for information to anybody. So whether it's organizations, individuals, governments, they could all participate.
Yes. So we're always open for feedback and put that out publicly. And then also have a series of workshops, and we put out drafts for public comment. So anyone is welcome to submit feedback. And we do also put those comments online, and you can see all the feedback that we got along the way.
Yeah, my understanding was the response was overwhelming, was it?
Yes, and actually we're very excited to see the first public workshop we held virtually back in August 2022. Had over 4,000 participants from 100 different countries, so we were very excited to see that interest and
Talking about
get that
international,
input and learn from
4,000 people, you say, in 100 different countries in an online conference. That's a lot of people.
Yes,
that's a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, so that was
and it was
very
up to
exciting
you to make sure that there was some kind of unity between all those opinions then.
No, our team
Yeah, well,
worked
we
very closely on many
adjudicate.
cross NIST.
Yeah, we adjudicate all of the comments, right? We received 420 submissions from organizations containing over 3,000 comments. And so our team went comment by comment, and we do that with every publication that we have to respond to those and incorporate them, or whatever we need to do, adjudicate that comment. But we go through every single one to review them and discuss them and potentially engage the submitter in further discussion if we need to. And so, yeah, it's there were a lot of comments, but
Could you share a
that is
couple
our
of highlights
process.
of things that the respondents said should improve, or where was the what was the void? What did they want added?
Well, I think, throughout the RFI process and throughout all the feedback, some of the major changes that we came to were the themes throughout the process, right? Can you enhance usability so that it's easier for practitioners to incorporate this into our day to day? Place more emphasis on governance and supply chain. Also update it to address some of the changes in the threat landscape. And so these are some of the bigger themes that came out through the process.
Okay. And one of the things also was that it needed to be more practical. There's now quick guides, for example, and if you go on the NIST website, actually there's a ton of things to download for free, right? It's Excel spreadsheets with all taxonomy. Can you speak a little bit about why you chose to develop that? Because that wasn't in the 1.0, and also not in the 1.1.
I'm sorry?
That was not in the 1.0 or the 1.1 version.
Right. We added a lot of resources to kind of the when we released CSF 2.0 because a lot of people associate the cybersecurity framework with a PDF. There's only so much you can do with just a PDF. And so now we have like the CSF 2.0 tool where you can view the CSF dynamically on the website. You can export it into Excel or JSON in order to kind of better incorporate it into your day-to-day work. And we also recognize that organizations aren't only using the cybersecurity framework on its own, right? There are many different frameworks and guidelines that organizations are using. So this enables them to kind of work with them better together.
Is that an issue that there's too
Yeah.
many frameworks available in the world?
I don't
No,
Yeah,
I'm not sure
I
if
don't
saying
know
an
if I
issue,
have
but
any
we do definitely want to
Yeah.
keep that in mind and know that people are using
Yeah.
different things and ensure that our resources are flexible and can be complementary. And that was another theme we heard throughout this process of getting public feedback is that people really valued the flexibility of the framework and that it was not a prescriptive checklist or certain things that had to be done that not everyone might be able to achieve given constraints and resources and staff. So having that flexibility remained important, but we did also hear that the need for implementation guidance or more crosswalks and mappings to show how it could be used along with those other existing standards and frameworks. We wanted to take that into account too to help make it as easy as possible for users of the framework to be able to use it. And again, still leverage and use international standards as well.
Yeah, so it's a bit more on the how do we do it and not what do we do exactly. That's that's what the need is for, and that's what you're expanded on. Then
Yeah, the resources are kind of with the implementation or informative references and the templates kind of help organizations put the CSF into practice.
okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the three most major changes compared to the 1.1 in a minute. But before we do this, our viewers know that they can also win stuff. So it's now time for our treasure hunt. This is something that our viewers actually depend on. So let me address that real quick. Because, as you know, you can win a cool Threat Talk t-shirt from us. And you need to send the code that I'm about to announce to code@threat-talks.com. And the code is 472060. Good luck. Okay, we were just talking about the whole process where the whole world more or less was consulted in what to improve on the 1.1 version. Not that it was bad, but the world changes, so there are a couple of new developments that needed to be incorporated, right? And let's briefly talk next time. We'll have another episode of Threat Talks. We're going to deep dive on those three, but let's briefly discuss them because they are, first of all, there's this whole new. I mean, we all know the colorful ring, but there's now a govern inner ring there. So I think we need to talk about that one. Let's also talk a little bit about all those different resources that now come with the framework, like the quick guides and the subcategories and all that, all the documentation that is available. There's lots of value in there, I think. And another topic is the supply chain, which everybody talks about, of course. So it's, to me, not really a surprise. It's now in 2.0. Let's start with the govern function. Why is that necessary? What was the main concern of users of the previous version of the framework?
Well, so many organizations view cybersecurity in a silo. And so the focus on cybersecurity governance was really to highlight the importance of ensuring that cybersecurity capabilities support an organization's broader mission, right? And that it's connected to your enterprise risk management. And so that was really the goal of it, is to not view cybersecurity as a silo, but to connect it into your broader business's strategy and your enterprise risk management as a whole.
Okay, yeah. So because there's if you open the standard, and there's lots of information about how to get from. I mean, you assess your current situation and define a target, and then do a gap analysis. Can you speak a little bit on how the governance, broadly speaking, works?
Yeah, I mean, governance underpins. That's why it's in the circle, in the middle of the circle of the functions, right? So governance underpins kind of how you carry out the other functions of the CSF. So it's the planning, it's the strategy, it's how important is cybersecurity to our mission. Do we have a response plan in place do we know who is responsible for cybersecurity risk management in our organization? Um, it's all these planning pieces and communicative pieces that go into cybersecurity risk management. And it's also looking at, do we understand our risk appetite, right? What is our risk appetite for the organization? How are we incorporating the board? And how are we working with technical leadership and leadership across the organization to coordinate cybersecurity risk management? And so it's very big and broad, but that piece is so critical to building out a fully functioning, capable, resilient cybersecurity risk management strategy.
So in hindsight, it's a bit of a surprise that it really worked that well. Then I mean, the 1.1 version. I mean, it was NIST. The CSF 1.1 was really great in terms of all the things you need to do. But now we have like this opportunity to connect it indeed to risk management, maybe to indeed ISO standards. Is that the goal of this piece?
Well, I mean, when you say ISO standards, so I mean, the cybersecurity framework is it references many different standards and guidelines. ISO being one of them, or 853 from NIST being one of them. So it's built off of and references many different standards, and it does connect them. And we have a tool that we'll talk about in our next episode that really illustrates kind of those crosswalks to various standards and frameworks. But governance was always, there were components of it already in the cybersecurity framework before 2.0. It's just now they've been kind of extracted up into their own function. And I will add that as an organization, one of the things you do need to be looking at is, what are our legal, regulatory, contractual requirements that we have to comply with, right? Compliance isn't everything, but part of governance is recognizing what are all the various standards and guidelines that we do as an organization need to be complying with. And so that's a critical piece of it.
Understood. Yeah, okay. Hey, let's go to the next one. There's so much new material available, right? Like quick guys, could you name a few and tell us what they are for and what we get out of those?
Yeah, so we started. So when we published the cybersecurity framework, we wanted it to not just be that PDF, as I was talking about. We wanted it to be a whole suite of resources, and that's how we view the CSF, as a suite of resources. And so we released quick start guides. There are specific topics. We have one for small business to help them get started with the cybersecurity framework. We have one on supply chain risk management, one on enterprise risk management. So how can you better understand these topics as they relate to the cybersecurity framework? And we're continuing to release quick start guides into this year, actually. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, a searchable, exportable catalog of informative references, of implementation examples. So our CSF 2.0 tool is one of those resources where you can look at maybe just the govern function if you only want to look at that, and see what some informative references or implementation examples are. And implementation examples were introduced to just highlight kind of some examples of how you might achieve a particular subcategory within the cybersecurity framework. They're not exhaustive by any means, but again, it's adding another piece of granularity to it. And so these are some of the resources that we wanted to release with the CSF. We also included templates. So if you wanted to create a cybersecurity framework profile for your organization, you can use a template to create that profile, or to create a community profile. So templates, quick start guides, informative references and implementation examples, catalogs, a lot of resources for organizations to kind of, they don't have to use them all. Not everybody will, but just pick and choose what would work best for your organization.
Yeah, and like you said in the beginning, they're also aimed at the small businesses that need more help, that can't really afford or don't have someone in-house that is a CISO, like you mentioned. And this is a good starting point for someone who is semi-savvy then in the subject, and then really gets hit the ground running, correct?
That's right.
Because I saw really practical examples like a checklist, like does your banking application have MFA? Yes, no, check. It's to that level, huh? So it's really becoming real practical. Okay, great. Yeah, let's briefly talk about the last one that we talked about, the supply chain. I mean, supply chain. How do you define supply chain? Is this like a bill of material for software, for example, or is this contractual? Or all of the above?
Cybersecurity supply chain risk management reflects really the growing need for organizations to ensure that not only their own cybersecurity resilience, but also that of the external entities that they rely on. And so that comes in many different fashions, whether that is through understanding who we rely upon for goods and services for our organization, what technologies we're purchasing and bringing onto our network, and understanding kind of where we're purchasing that from, who we're purchasing that from. It is understanding so many components of what makes our hyper-connected economy run, recognizing that we're all part of this complex supply chain. And so what we don't want to do is introduce cybersecurity risks to other organizations, and we don't want other organizations to introduce cybersecurity risks to us. And so it incorporates a lot of the steps that organizations can take to kind of minimize those risks. And as I said, one of the resources that we published along with the CSF is a cybersecurity supply chain risk management quick start guide that organizations can really look at. It ties to all of NIST's cybersecurity supply chain, our broader portfolio of work. But it's a good starting point if you're beginning to think about supply chain risk management, particularly cybersecurity supply chain risk management. What are some things that you can begin, or steps you can begin to begin thinking about kind of how to address this?
Yeah, you're talking about the PDF guide that you can download, huh? Now, I opened it, and then if you get in there, then there's a ton of information. I mean, it's nicely categorized what kind of information you would want, and that there's something in it for everybody. If you're a small business or like a CISO of a really huge organization, and then there's all kinds of documentation, checklists, and all that to help you actually get the whole problem that you just described under control. That's the goal of this. Yeah, it's good that there's okay, clear. Well, thank you very much. Our time is up for today, but next time we will certainly talk about those 3 items a little bit more in depth. Thank you both. And to our viewers, I say thank you very much for tuning in today. If you like this episode of Threat Talks, please like it. It will help us spread the word further. And if you don't want to miss that next episode about Threat Talks, press the subscribe button because it will automatically be in your inbox. Thank you very much. See you next time. Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and M6. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.